Hello, everyone. I'm Barbara Harris, co-chair of the Racial Justice Committee for Women's Voices Raised for Social Justice. And along with my co-chair, Carol Wolfsey, we want to welcome you to today's Lunch and Learn. I'm going to give you just a little background about why this topic. Over the past several years, the arts and cultural organizations of St. Louis have very intentionally been using the lens of social and racial justice in their programming and staffing. Both the Regional Arts Commission and the Repertory Theater of St. Louis now have African-American women in their top leadership positions. And the Art Museum has recently named its first ever woman director, who was born in South Korea. The St. Louis Shakespeare Festival's annual production in Forest Park this past summer was King Lear, performed by a nearly all-Black cast, including King Lear. Opera Theater of St. Louis and Jazz St. Louis have co-commissioned 2 operas by African-American jazz musician Terrence Blanchard, the most recent of which was Fire Shut Up in My Bones, that premiered at Opera Theater in 2019, and this fall was chosen to open the Metropolitan Opera season, the first time the Met has performed an opera by a Black composer. These are very exciting things that are happening now, and they're happening in St. Louis. There is evidence that they are building a more diverse audience for these events and allowing us all to get together and share some common interests. We need to support these, just a little pitch for them. We need to support them as audience members, volunteers, and donors. So our guests today are 2 very impressive young men who are working together to make St. Louis a better place for everyone to work and live. They are Adam Flores, who's Community Outreach and Education Manager with the St. Louis Shakespeare Festival, and Aaron Williams, who is the board chairman of For the Ville, a community-based tourism and economic development organization in the historic Black neighborhood of the Ville. If you want to know more about them, you can go to the Women's Voices website. Their bios are there. And if you have questions for them after their presentation, please put them in the chat and Nancy Litz will be there to ask them. So Adam and Aaron, welcome. And thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you for having us. Aaron, I'm going to start off and just go for a bit, and then I'll pass it over to you if that's cool with you.
Sure.
Thank you so much for letting us be here. Like Barbara mentioned in that amazing introduction, my name is Adam Flores. I'm the manager of community engagement and education at the St. Louis Shakespeare Festival. One of the most exciting parts of that work is our Shakespeare in the Streets program. This is a program that I've long been excited about in my time here in St. Louis, but also am just honored to kind of be shepherding now as we move forward. Barbara did a great job of mentioning how lots of communities and organizations in St. Louis are raising the racial diversity in their leadership, as well as in the type of programming that they do. And that has been a really exciting thing. But for a long time, the St. Louis Shakespeare Festival has had a particular community outreach program in the Shakespeare in the Streets. It started in 2012 on Cherokee Street as a community engaged project. And this was the brainchild of Rick Dildine, our former artistic director, and is in the model of Cornerstone Theater Company. Cornerstone Theater Company is based in LA now, but is a theater company that started in 1992 that went into different communities and did residencies anywhere from 9 months to 18 months in a community, learning about the community, engaging with them, and then using theater as a way to tell and amplify the stories of that community. This is a community engagement model that has been used all over the place, but we have been using since 2012 with the leadership of Nancy Bell, who is a local playwright, actor, and director that kind of was the leading artistic vision for a long time of this program. Started on Cherokee Street and has gone to lots of different locations over the years. We were blessed that we had Mariah Richardson come to us as a playwright who we'd worked with before. And Mariah said, "You've got this program, you have to go to the Ville. And people need to know about the Ville because Mariah, as well as being an incredible playwright, is a Sumner graduate, and went to Sumner High School and said, you got to go to the Ville. And so took Tom Ridgely, our artistic director, to a homecoming football game and said, look at this community. Here are all the people that are still here, engaged with it and part of it. And so we immediately said, okay, great. The Ville's where we're going to be. Mariah, you're going to write it. We also had really great leadership from Thomasina Clark, who works on For the Ville with Aaron. And Thomasina Clark was the director for the program, and is a Ville resident, lives in the Ville, and is a great theater artist who had been on our main stage before and all of these other things. And so we kind of went into the Ville and started doing the work and engaging with community, meeting Aaron, finding out where we needed to be and showing up to events and helping raise funds and bring supplies and doing all the things that you do when you're kind of beginning to be part of that community. And that kind of culminated, and I hate to use the term culminate because our work in the Ville is not done. But there was kind of this cap that was the Shakespeare in the Streets Ville. A Vengeance was the name of the play that performed in September in front of the Annie Malone home. That was a great success, and was well received. Some of our larger audiences for Shakespeare in the Streets, and a large majority of that was the community coming out to see the show. And so that was a really exciting thing. We're going to talk more about the Ville and all the work that's going on there, but I want to kind of just step back and frame larger the conversation about how the arts are integrating. And one of the things that is so essential to community engagement, but also into this kind of work at large, is not coming forward as artists with a sort of plan or expectation of outcomes. One of the things we talk a lot about is that our best positioning can be saying, we are here, what kind of things can we provide, what kind of resources are needed, and not trying to dictate outcomes other than being listening, being present, and engaging with the community in the best way that we possibly can. Instead of coming in and saying, we're going to do this play and it's going to change hearts and minds in this way and in that way and whatever it might be. Instead, we're saying, what kinds of things can we do and what kind of opportunities and what kind of conversations can we raise? And the biggest benefit we've had is then our work with Sumner High School. I'll let Aaron talk a little bit about the importance of Sumner High School and all of that. But what really came out of it was that SLPS, St. Louis Public Schools, was looking to close Sumner High School. And the community said, we can't let that happen. This is a beacon in the community. This is an important part of the community. How can we keep this from happening? And how can us at the St. Louis Shakespeare Festival find a way to leverage our resources and our talents to keep this alive? And so part of what we're doing is we've created arts pathways along with other arts organizations in the community at large, to take over a lot of the arts education happening at Sumner High School. And so we are teaching drama, fine art, dance, and music classes at Sumner High School with partners like Stages St. Louis, Pianos for People, Maria Ellis, the Contemporary Art Museum, Craft Alliance, a host of other artists, to engage the Black Repertory Theater to bring arts education to Sumner High School in order to alleviate some of the resources that the school needs to just like run class, and then also to give Sumner some added identity and a way to say, hey, this is the draw that will come from going to Sumner High School, is that you'll have all this incredible arts integration that happens. And so that's been a lot of that continued work that came out of saying, hey, we want to show up to this community. And so all of that is to say that we didn't show up to the Ville and said, hey, we want to take over arts at the high school. No, we just showed up and we said, what is of need? How can we be of resources? How can we leverage the resources that we have in a way that is beneficial to you? that positioning as an arts organization as here to listen first is also a big part of the shift that you're seeing. You know, in a lot of the organizations that Barbara mentioned and the leadership change, the first thing that all of those leaders are doing is taking stock of the community and saying what is needed, what already exists, how can we engage more deeply, how can we engage in a way that is more impactful. And so our position at the St. Louis Shakespeare Festival is that we want to be listening to the community and hearing where the needs are and then responding as opposed to dictating. The other real quick example I'll give to that is was mentioned of our production of King Lear that we just produced. That production, the first thing that we did was we found a Black director in Carl Cofield that we felt really excited about and said, Carl, what is the vision? What is the world that you are interested in? And he came back and said, I would like to do King Lear, and let him make those decisions. And then, you know, who is the team that you're building out? And in doing so, was able to imbue this production with a lot of Black excellence in a way that would not have worked if we had just said, we're going to do a all Black production of Shakespeare. That's fine. But what's better is to say, let's imbue this Black leader with the opportunity to make the world that they want to make and build it out in the way that they want to build it out. And then we can imbue it with all sorts of kind of excellence and opportunities. That was an extremely successful way of us using our leverage as a predominantly white institution to empower Black artists and Black creatives to say what they need and what is of most use. And so we're continuing to do that in the Ville as part of our work there. I will let Aaron talk about the Ville and for the Ville and kind of all the things that they're doing, and then piggyback in on kind of that conversation. But I just kind of wanted to frame kind of as far as like where the arts is located. What we're really doing is just trying to find people like Aaron who are already doing the work, who have been in the community, and saying, how can we help? What can we do? And try to make that happen. But I'll let Aaron talk more about the Ville and the amazing community that it is and all that's located there.
Thanks, Adam. So first of all, thank you all for letting me be here. I just want to share with you all that my son was born yesterday. So if someone starts talking in the background, I am reporting to you from the hospital right now. So, you know, baby takes priority. So excuse any interruptions. But thank you for allowing me to be here today. My name is Aaron Williams. I am co-founder and board chair of For the Ville, which is a community-based tourism, arts, and economic development organization in the Ville neighborhood. I co-founded For the Ville 4 years ago with two lifetime residents, Julia Allen and Thomasina Clark. Both of them were born in Homer G. Phillips Hospital and have been in the Ville their entire lives. So they know a lot more about that place than I do. I learned about the Ville while I was a student at Washington University as a product of the 18th and Vine District in Kansas City, which is another historic Black neighborhood. I immediately felt some familiarity with the Ville and decided to commit myself to that neighborhood. And that ultimately led me to meeting people like Julia and Thomasina. We founded For the Ville, one, out of a frustration with the fact that so many people in the region either don't know about the neighborhood's cultural legacy or they don't acknowledge it to the extent that it should be acknowledged. So we wanted to change that. And we decided to do that by first reclaiming the history and the cultural legacy and trying to leverage that to catalyze more economic development and community power building in the neighborhood. So what does that look like? Essentially what that is us providing tourism operations. So we give tours, both walking tours of the neighborhood and bus tours of the entire city. We sell merchandise on our website, and we lead community art projects. The first one that we ever did was the billboard project in our neighborhood, where we commissioned professional artists to design billboards, and then we put them up throughout the neighborhood. But other projects have included work that we've done with other partners on the Shelley House and a t-shirt design competition, which led to our second t-shirt that we sell. And then also we look for catalytic projects that are based in the arts to begin this regeneration process and conversation about the neighborhood. So 2 examples of that are everything we've done with Shakespeare Festival, and then also our Cultural Boulevard project, where we're trying to reimagine the MLK Boulevard commercial district in the neighborhood by visualizing the cultural legacy through art and advocating for public infrastructure improvements. But let's jump back really quick to our relationship with Shakespeare Festival. So Shakespeare came to us by way of the people that Adam already mentioned, Mariah Richardson, and then Thomasina Clark, who is our board treasurer, with this idea of creating a play that is in the Ville, for the Ville, and all about the Ville's history. That led to, due to COVID, a essentially 3-year relationship, right, Adam? I think we've been hanging out with each other now for 3 years, and I like to say that Shakespeare is a great example of how you can practice good community engagement and community immersion, because Adam showed up first and said, "Hi, I'm Adam. I'm with Shakespeare Festival. What do you need me to do?" And when he met me, I gave him a list of meetings, and I said, "Well, you can start by coming to all these meetings and meeting more people in the neighborhood, and then they'll tell you what they need of you." That ultimately led to things like Adam providing his pickup truck to support community events, something that on the surface has nothing to do with Shakespeare in the streets, right? But that allowed him to build relationships and find more stories to contribute to that play, which turned out to be an amazing thing. And because this relationship was so genuine and so strong, once the threat of Sumner High School being closed came about, Shakespeare reached out to us after we raised our head and said, "This is inappropriate." And they said, "How can we support?" And they had some ideas of getting all of the arts organizations to write a letter of support to the letter that we submitted to the school district, saying, Sumner is too important to our region's culture and arts history to see it close. And I think that really lifted up our voice and eventually led to the school district saying, "Okay, we hear you. How can you help us keep this school open?" And that kicked off this whole recovery planning process that Adam outlined for you. Why is Sumner High School important? So a lot of you may already know this, but I'll just repeat it for the sake of this meeting. Sumner High School was the first African-American high school west of the Mississippi River, founded in 1875, due in large part to the work of Captain Charlton Hunt Tandy, who is also honored in our neighborhood because the neighborhood rec center is named after him. But he drafted a board ordinance, and which eventually led to St. Louis Public Schools opening its first Black high school. That first Black high school opened in Chestnut Valley, which is the current location of the St. Louis Blues Arena, and it was called Sumner High School. When it opened, the facilities that it was put in were largely insufficient, and they were located in a not so attractive area for children. So if you know the history of Chestnut Valley, you know that it was the birthplace of ragtime music. So the neighborhood was full of brothels and bars and speakeasies and crime and cemeteries. It was a perfect place for the birth of America's popular music and other arts, but not ideal for children to attend school. So the Black parents of St. Louis advocated for a new facility that was in a safer location, that was in the middle of the Black community, and that provided facilities that were sufficient for teaching and training their children. And they advocated for the Ville neighborhood because it was central to where a lot of Black people lived, between Mill Creek Valley, the Ville, and like the Finney district, which was just south of the Ville neighborhood. They felt like it was a central location to educate Black students. And the Ville and Sumner's new facility and current facility was ultimately constructed in the Ville in 1908 and opened in 1910. Since then, it has graduated a whole list of notable figures that you can find through a Wikipedia search or by visiting our website, fortheville.org. I won't bore you with the list today, but you do know some of them, like Chuck Berry, Tina Turner, Dick Gregory, and Grace Bumbry. Those are some of the larger names that have come out of that school, but the list is very extensive. And the reason why we had to raise our hand and say, hey, look, St. Louis Public, Sumner is in the place it is now because of your history of racist policies and decision making that basically put a stress on the school that led to its deterioration from a peak of 5,000 students to when we raised our hand to save it from closing, just under 200 students due to a long list of policies decisions. The biggest one probably being the institution of the DSEG program, which was a direct result of St. Louis Public being called or being profiled as a constitutional violator by the Missouri Supreme Court. That decision led to the institution of the DSEG or the busing program, and really the drain of students from some of St. Louis Public's largest African-American schools, one being the Ville. But we thought, even though that, the current circumstance of the Ville is that it is largely underpopulated and the building is underutilized, it was too important to close. So we put our heads together and recruited a lot of arts organizations and community organizations to put together a plan to save it. Adam mentioned the integration of the arts pathways, and that happened this year. And then next year, we will be complementing those arts pathways with an activism pathway, a history, museums, and tourism pathway, and potentially a studio lab that will focus on the reimagination and redesign of the Sumner grounds and building, because we want to figure out how to bring more programs into the school. But the thing that is most special to me from this, and I forgot to mention, we also created a Sumner advisory board, which kind of puts it up there, in my opinion, at the tier of like Collegiate School of Biomedical Sciences, which also has an advisory board and allows some regional power brokers to come in and really start advocating for more resource allocation to the school, which I think ultimately will lead to it becoming a lot stronger and sort of reinforcing this new brand that we're bringing to the school. But most important thing is, I think none of this would be possible if it were not for Shakespeare Festival's commitment to not just doing an event in the community, like not just helicoptering in, doing what they do and then leaving, but really building a relationship with community and trying to help them where they need and want to be helped. And upon arriving in the Ville, what Shakespeare Festival learned is, sure, we have a lot of stories to tell, but we have these really important institutions that if you really care, you'll help us keep them open and revive them. And here we are today. Adam, did I miss anything?
No, I think that's great. I mean, the other thing to kind of just like highlight that Aaron is working with is the Northside Community Housing and the work that's happening there, that it's not just about sort of a historical, let's remember what happened in the past. It is about building a future for the Ville and bringing families back to the Ville and bringing an opportunity for people to build a future in the Ville that is prosperous, that it does no good to only be trying to hold on to what happened in the past and the acolytes of the past, but it's important to say, hey, there is space here to raise a family. There are homes here. There are places to build and things to grow. So I don't know if you want to mention any of that work as well, Aaron, because I think that that's a really important part of the overall revitalization of what's happening in the Ville.
Yeah. So this starts to sort of teeter into like my personal commitments to the Ville and what I think is needed to really see this community rise again. The silver bullet approach, really not for this community, but not for anything in St. Louis, doesn't work. So you're not going to bring in this one magical thing and transform the neighborhood. It really takes a bunch of small things working together to see a community rise. So because of that, I like to say I am a bit stretched in the community. In addition to being the board chairman of For the Ville and the Sumner Advisory Board chairman, I also am a board member for Northside Community Housing, which is the community development corporation in the Ville neighborhood that's been developing affordable housing and doing rehabs for the past 44 years. We own just under 300 properties that are all rental properties. And then we also develop for sale properties to increase home ownership in the neighborhood. And we facilitate a program called Make It Home, which is a rent to own program through the low income housing tax credit program. So it allows some of our low income renters to transition into home ownership through our guidance. And we provide things like personal finance assistance and help them provide them with some like home essentials and life essentials when they run into hard times, and help them raise their credit score and all those things to prepare them to be homeowners. So that not only, so one, Northside Community Housing essentially birthed For the Ville because they were the fiscal sponsor of For the Ville, and we literally grew out of their office, even though the founders were not part of Northside Community Housing, except for myself. But also, it shows up, housing development is just one piece that works in tandem with arts and economic development. In addition to that, you need social services. So you start to think of things like Bridge of Hope that serves the unhoused population in the Ville. You start to think a lot of Revitalization 2000, which serves some of the students in the Ville with summer programs and weekend STEAM programs. You start to think of Annie Malone Children and Family Services, which serves children that really have like a little bit of family insecurity, but also families that are trying to stabilize their lives. You start to think of all the churches in the neighborhood that are supporting Sumner and one another and putting on community events, managing community gardens. All of us are in constant communication and working together to lift up this community. And Shakespeare has largely become a part of that community. They've developed their own relationships with all of those organizations after being introduced to them through For the Ville and through the Ville Collaborative. And I at least like to be present in all of these things, right? So I'm also a board member at Revitalization 2000, so that I can be the person that has an understanding of the larger picture, and I can connect the dots when the dots need to be connected, right? Or I can fill the gaps when the gaps need to be connected. That's not saying at all that I do all of the work. It's just that I make sure that the people that are doing the work can be supported by one another or by outside resources, like people like you. These presentations usually lead to people from outside who have resources that we don't have access to, providing them to the neighborhood. So yeah, I think I sit in a position as like a connector in the neighborhood, in addition to helping with housing and helping with arts and economic development in the neighborhood. And all of that is important because, if you make Sumner strong and you don't make the neighborhood strong, then what you have is like some kind of the effect you have with our churches now, right? Most of the people that go to our churches in the Ville don't live in the Ville because they've all moved out. We don't want it to look like that, right? We want our students to live in and around the Ville and also go to the Ville. That means we need the neighborhood to be strong at the same time that we need the school to be strong. So we're constantly trying things out and failing at a fast pace to figure out how to make sure all the boats are lifted with the tide.
And I'll just say real quick that, Mariah, who wrote our play, for those who weren't able to see it, one of the main thrusts of the play was we need people to come back and live in the Ville. We need there to be life there. There needs to be people who start a business, who build a home, who raise a family, and like engage in that space, not in obviously like a gentrifying way, but in a way of like, there's some really affordable housing and resources there that can really bring revitalization back to the community. And so, that kind of thing that Aaron is talking about, being like, hey, this is what, Northside Community Housing is doing, that shows up in the play, right? That shows up in the art that we make, that like, it's about not just remembering this history, but it's about the next steps of like engaging with ownership and stuff like that. That is really, really important. And then the other thing too, the Shakespeare Festival came in and did the show, but we were involved in lots of other projects. And we were also really blessed to be able to partner with other events that were already going on in the community, like the For the Villas Trap Run, which is a 5K run that they do in the community, that is something they had been doing for a while, that we were able to just like be like, hey, we'll do our show on the same weekend. And it was the first 5K that I'd ever run. And I made it, barely, but I did it. And so, engaging and finding those opportunities to have art around the other things that are already happening in the community is a real big part of it. And you consistently just engage with all the different kinds of dynamics that are happening. I will also say, in full transparency, St. Louis is such a racially divided city. I had never spent as much time on the north side of the city as I have now that I work and engaged in the community in the Ville. Like, I was not going north of Del Mar for a lot of my life. There wasn't a lot of time of me going north of Del Mar. And now I know more of that north side part of the city than I ever did. And I know those streets, and I know the places, and I know the people. And so having this as an opportunity to break the racial divides in our own organization and in my own life is also a big benefit of that. Like, continually showing up means going there, going to the place that you don't know, that you haven't spent time at. And one of the benefits of art making is that art making takes time. And so to really do it, you got to be you're there every day. You're going to all the meetings, you're at the rehearsal, you're driving through, you're doing all these things, and you're going into the shops, and you're learning the places. And that long process of really good art making, just means that you're spending a lot more time in a community that I, because of the racial divide of the city, was not spending time in. Like, I just had never spent time in the Ville in a way that I do now, and the way that I know about it, and the way that I seek it out on my own time is a different thing than normal. Great. Should we hit some of these questions in the chat? Sorry, just looking at these.
Were we just addressing the questions that are in the chat, or people were just asking questions?
Both. I was just looking to see if there was anything in the chat that we hadn't hit on yet. Yeah, so there is this, revitalization. We talked about Northside Community Housing is bringing people back to the North Side for that housing. I will also say this, mentioned John Lewis. It was also really great that at our Saturday performance of the show in the Ville, Congressperson Cori Bush was in attendance at the show and was invited up on stage and spoke to the crowd. And so these kind of arts events is another great opportunity for Alderwoman Dwindlin Evans was in attendance that same night as well. So bringing these arts also brings time to bring attention from elected officials to the community, and helps them think about it. Lots of the fund initiatives are funded through contributions and also different kinds of grants and stuff like this. I will also say that a lot of the work that the Ville Collaborative and other events are doing is kind of pooling resources from each other to make events happen, and saying, great, we're going to pitch in some money here, pitch in some money there. I don't know, Aaron, if you want to speak any more to how funding is brought around from Northside Community Housing or for the Ville or anything like that.
Yeah, so I think every group in the neighborhood sort of has their own funding sources. Northside Community Housing is, for the most part, self-funded through our development. So when we develop, we get a developer fee. But then also we typically have reserves to support programming around our developments. So that's how that organization is supported. We also apply for grants for some of the services that we provide through our community engagement manager. For the Ville, our efforts are largely funded through grants and through the income that we generate from tours and merchandising, and like speaking engagements or whatever opportunity we get. We largely work through partnerships, so trying to identify partners from outside the community who have like a stronger income statement or financials that can apply for grants, and then perform those grants in our neighborhood. So Shakespeare Festival, TrailNet, Missouri Historical Society, those are all organizations that we've worked with and continue to work with on a regular basis to strengthen our work. Also, the Missouri State Department of Health and Senior Services, they support a lot of things that we do. Organizations like Northside Youth and Senior Services have a whole slew of grants, either through health departments or senior service funds or one-off grants to support everything that they do. Revitalization 2000 in Claver House, they are largely supported by like the Catholic services community or the Jesuit community, because they are connected. They were founded out of St. Matthew, the Apostle Catholic Church, and are very connected to the Catholic space. Yeah, it's kind of hard. I mean, everyone is pursuing their own funding and trying to make something happen. The Ville Collaborative, everything we do through the Ville Collaborative does not have a funding source. Like Adam said, that's where we just ask everyone participating to pool their funds, like give $100, give $200, or provide some in-kind donations to make our annual events happen, or any other needs that we have be fulfilled.
I will also just say that, tons of opportunities to, take the tours. I highly recommend taking a tour with, for the Ville. It's great. I think I've been on the tour 3 times now, with different groups, and every time, learn something new and engage with the community in a new and different way. Shakespeare Festival has its own like kind of, outreach for like Facebook, Instagram, our website, mailing addresses, but similarly, engaging with For the Ville on social media is also really helpful. And then you can also always, be signed up for those Ville Collaborative emails, which will tell you, when the meetings are happening and who's asking for what and what's coming up next, and all of those kinds of things is a really great way to engage in that space. The other thing too, just to go back to, at one point the Ville, had lots of educational institutions, right? So Teachers College was there. There was all sorts of other Turner Middle, which then became Turner Middle. There was lots of, education happening in the Ville that a lot of it has left the community. And so, Sumner would be kind of one of those last institutions of real strong education in the community that was going to be left, which was another reason why we really wanted to keep it, because it was going to leave a real void in, permanent student services in the community that would have been a real loss and tragedy. And so it's important to note that there was once a rich history of Black St. Louisans could do their entire educational career all the way through, college within a mile square block. And now that's no longer the case, and students are having to be bused and shipped all over the place to get that same kind of education. And so keeping Sumner open was important for those reasons as well.
There was a question about how are there any volunteer opportunities before the Ville? As far as For the Ville goes, it's mostly like it's a nonprofit organization that, we have our operations that are largely from the board members, the working board members, and soon to be staff. But we don't really have any programs that require volunteers at the moment. You can support our tours though, and purchase our merchandise and attend our events when we have them. I think that does a lot for us, and just mentioning us on social media helps a lot. But if you are interested in becoming more involved in the Ville as a volunteer, then I recommend you do exactly what Adam did and start coming to Ville Collaborative meetings and meeting some of the other organizations and asking them where they need help. We have one guy who's from the UK who started coming around in the neighborhood, sort of asking me, well, what do you need? How can I help? So come to the Ville Collaborative meetings. You'll meet people. And that led to him meeting the principal at Hickey Elementary School. Next thing I know it, he's sending coats to Hickey Elementary School and he's participating in after school programs. And then after that, he met a group of guys that hung out around Hickey Elementary School. And now they have like devotional services like weekly, just on a corner in the neighborhood. So he built his own relationships and he figured out how to contribute to the neighborhood based on what community members were telling him they wanted and needed. And I would encourage everyone to do that. Like Adam said, in order for this community to continue to grow, you have to show up. You have to be in community and you have to be of community to contribute to it. It's not as simple as building something or throwing some dollars at it. The most important thing to the resilience of a community is its social infrastructure. It's the ability for people to call one another and say, hey, can you take care of this for me? The Cowrie Collective, I do a little for you, you do a little for me, and we build together. That's how towns were established. That's how cities were established. And regenerating the neighborhood will be no different. And that's what the Ville used to have, right? They had their bucket brigade if somebody's house caught on fire. Literally, Julia, in our tour, we stopped at Julia's house, which is right across the street from Antioch Baptist Church. And she tells a story about how their house caught on fire and all the men in the neighborhood basically came together with water hoses and put this fire out. And then they rebuilt all the parts that burned down because the fire department couldn't get to them fast enough. That type of infrastructure is what makes a strong community. It's not nice houses, it's manicured lawns, it's not expensive buildings and high rents. It's people knowing each other and supporting each other. So we want more Adam Flores's in our neighborhood to come to the neighborhood with that red pickup truck and do whatever you need to do with it, whether it's put out traffic barriers or run supplies for somebody. Because how much does it cost to rent a U-Haul? That's $200 that Adam just saved somebody just because he brought his truck over. It's really that simple. And then when you come to the community, you also bring your own ingenuity, right? You bring your ideas. Once you establish trust with community members, that's when they begin to welcome your ideas and find a place for your ideas. That's how we have a Shakespeare in the Streets. That's how we have a Sumner Advisory Board. That's how we have 8 arts partners in Sumner High Schools, because we built the trust, we shared our idea, and then they accepted our idea. And now we're putting it into action. And we're committed through the failure or through the success. And now I feel like I'm preaching, but I do want to say one more thing. Oftentimes, because of history and because of guilt, people with power and with privilege sort of get this hesitation about helping out, where they don't want to mess up, right? They don't want to be wrong. They don't want to be on the wrong side of history. They don't want to fail. That's, in my opinion, exactly what communities like the Ville don't need. We need someone to be bold, come in and fall flat on your face, trying. And I mean sincerely trying, because trying is what's going to get us to the next level. And none of us are capable of doing everything right the first time or the second time or whenever, but we're all capable of trying. And that we need that commitment more than we do perfection, because we can move the needle forward through trial and error.
And I will just add to that. I mean, and there's always like a little something to do. It's less like volunteering at like in a particularly organized way, but November 20th, we are taking volunteers and we're doing a big cleaning of Sumner High School. It just needs some TLC. And that's one of the other things, is that it's a big building that has been underused for a long time. And so and underused, I mean that like just not bodies in every classroom, right? The education and all that stuff is still there, but just someone needs to take a broom to some things, and someone needs to take out some of this trash and be like, hey, do we need this anymore? No, let's get it out. So November 20th, we are taking volunteers and doing a big cleaning of Sumner High School, particularly in the arts pathway places where we're starting to reuse the building and get it back up. So if folks are interested, that's a quick thing. People can reach out to me at adam@stlshakes.org, and we will get you signed up to help volunteer for that. And then yes, Homer G was closed for a long time, and then now is a senior living facility. And a lot of those folks in that senior facility, you know, had ties to the community or were born in the hospital and have stories to engage with what's going on there. So we're glad it's in use. Also to note that is where Homer G is, and it is firmly in the Ville, and nowhere else is Homer G. So if you know anything about that, just know that if anyone tells you that Homer G is anywhere else, it's not. That's where it is. Any questions that haven't been in the chat or that we need to address, Nancy? Anything that we're missing?
Yes, you've hit a lot of them. So I wanted to start by congratulating Aaron and giving him like a gigundous thumbs up for being with us, given what's going on in his life. That's great, happy news, and you are definitely a superhero. I'm trying to number them.
I'm going to pass that recognition over to my wife.
Well,
the real superhero.
We all understand you did some really hard work here, but we're still going to give you some kudos as well.
Thank you.
Number two, a lot of people have been asking about the tours, and I understand that the organizers of this program today for Women's Voices are already exploring the possibility of putting together a Women's Voices session of these tours. So be on the lookout on our newsletter for that. And I think there'll be so much interest, we might have to even do multiples. A lot of questions were around funding and how can we support, and a sort of tangent question to that is wonder about particularly Adam's thoughts about suppressing the normal dominant culture tendency to come in and say, okay, we're here, aren't we great, we're gonna fix it. Clearly, you haven't let your participation devolve into that, and I wondered if you would share just a little bit about that for the rest of us.
Yeah, I mean, look, I think that our collaboration and continued partnership in the Ville has been really successful. I cannot say that it hasn't been without, you know, mistakes and missteps and little things that we could have done better and wish we had done better. But in general, I think what we've said and, you know, kind of to frame consistently is taking one of the things that's been great about the Ville is that we have someone like Aaron, we have someone like Thomasina, we have leaders that we can identify that we can then listen to. And so being able to identify leadership and instead of taking on leadership as a predominantly white institution was a huge step. That's saying, you know, here is the person and, you know, and I'm going to let Aaron sit in a meeting and hear all the disparate voices of his community. And then he's going to say, I think this is the way we should take a step. Because what becomes hard for predominantly white institutions and white people is that they come in and then they get hearing mixed signals, right? This person in this community says we should do this thing, and this person in the community says that we should do a different thing. And so you've got people from the same community disagreeing. And so for us, what was important was identifying leadership that we were going to be like, we're going to let them distill what they think is the next best step. And if we have said we're allowing leadership to lead us, then they can deal with all the quibbles in the community. You know what I mean? That a lot of people would come to Aaron and want something, and Aaron's like, no, I'm not going to do that. That's not what we want to do. We're going to do this other thing. And he's saying no instead of me saying no, right? I'm not having to decipher all of that. I'm allowing leadership within the community to be identified and to kind of hear those disparate voices and to manage that politic. And I think that that's a really, really beneficial step to say, hey, instead of me making decisions and me deciding and me trying to even decipher out through the differences, I've got a leader that I'm following. And so we're going to just follow that leader and that leadership in the community. And, to the extent that, Aaron knew my younger brother before he knew me because they were doing work in the community, right? And so like when my brother's like, oh, I know Aaron, great, cool. There's a point of like, all right, then that's who I trust. Cause I mean, not that I fully trust my brother because he's my younger brother and like, whatever, but in general, saying, hey, this is this person that keeps identifying as someone that we can get behind, that becomes really beneficial. So in large part, what I would say is, find the leadership, find the people that you trust so that you are not becoming the leader, you are just supporting leadership. And I think that can be a really, really big beneficial thing, that we were not making a lot of the decisions in this process. We were just saying we're getting behind what the decision making has been, and we can advocate and we can say we think this is going to work and we can use our resources. But we're following, we're not leading. And I think that's a really beneficial thing.
Yeah, I want to piggyback on Adam with a few comments too. I do think that is a very safe way to enter into a community. But what needs to be happening at the same time is that you need to be building trust with the community. I can guarantee you right now that the Ville community would trust Shakespeare Festival making a decision for something in the Ville. Of course, it has to be something relevant to what they do, but they have put in the work and established enough trust where people will follow a decision that they make. And the same is for the Ville. I mean, we were fortunate enough to be founded by actual residents, lifetime residents of the community. So we by default had some trust already. But we've also worked to strengthen that reputation. And grow that reputation in the community. And that's more important than just being the ultimate decision maker. Because it allows community members to be honest with you, right? If they trust you, then they'll be honest with you about whatever decision you're making and tell you how to tweak it. But also, it gives you a little bit of creative liberty to try to change the narrative in a community. And that's important. We're not going to strengthen the community by doing the same old thing or by just reacting to what's happening to the community. You got to be in that position where you can try things with the support of the community. And it takes time, and it takes trust. And everybody who comes in the community should be trying to attain those two things, time in the community and trust in the community for themselves and for their organization. You can start with a partner, right, who can guide you, but ultimately you need to become of the community to help it transform.
Boy, great pieces of advice for both of you. Thank you so much. Let me see what else we haven't touched on.
It's okay if you, Nancy, to just address what Charles put in this chat. I believe Charles was the name, sorry. Mr. Bryson put about the hiring of Black artists. It is about providing opportunity. It is about seeing a space that can be done. When the benefit is when you do a story about the Ville, it's about Black people. And so you need to go find Black artists to tell that story. And so that becomes part of that. The other thing is just finding opportunities. The Shakespeare Festival also did a Christmas, late summer night stroll in June of 2020 when our main stage production was put on hold. And we partnered with Painted Black, which is a local institution of Black artists, visual artists, and they created these beautiful arches that went all over Forest Park. We then worked with them again on our Christmas Carol in the Central West End, which was also window displays and stuff like that. And it's just about purposely finding opportunities where it makes the most sense for the artists that you're working with to come from a racially diverse place. And if you do that with intentionality, you'll find more opportunities. Now, we are not perfect at that, and the Shakespeare Festival has a lot of way to grow when it comes to artists that we hire. You know, for us in particular, we are working diligently to increase the number of racially diverse people that we're hiring, not just on stage, but backstage, and doing all of our kind of scenic design and all of those kinds of things. That's a space where we're really working to build improvement on that. Everything from our stage managers to pushing the local union to hire more union hands of color. You know, it's constantly just trying to find reasons for it to make sense to prioritize that. And so that's one of the things that we're working on. We have a long way to go. The region has a long way to go. But it's just about being intentional and not lying and saying that, oh, it's just about the best person and da 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 da. It's like, no, you have to be intentional about representing whole people as they are and providing new and unique opportunities for them. But it's an uphill battle, but it's one that's gotten a lot better in the time that I've been in St. Louis, and will hopefully continue to get better.
I also think part of that too is acknowledging the power of art, and not just operating in this very centralized power structure where you just do art for art's sake. Art makes space, it makes community. Art can be temporary or it can have a long life. And I think we should always be aspiring for art that does have that long life, that is building space or community around it, and not just these things that look beautiful to our own individual eye, right? And does not benefit anyone or any place. If we can shift that perspective, I think that you'll see things done different in our region. Right now, I still think it's more centralized, and that's why For the Ville sort of navigates that art space the way we do. We see it's centralized, so we just latch on to the people that are part of that central group. Not saying that Shakespeare is one of those organizations, but we understand the power structure and acknowledge it and realize that we won't be able to change it until that centralized group trusts us enough to recommend how it should be changed. So right now, we're the ones on the fringes saying, hey, you can come do something with us, and we promise it'll be more powerful than what you typically do. So shifting our approach to art in the region will help a lot.
First, I'd like to unmute, and then I'd like to suggest that on an individual basis, we have the opportunity to support Black artists with our shopping dollars, and that there are terrific holiday marts and boutiques in areas where we might not typically shop, to really look at exposing ourselves and spreading our shopping dollars around in a little bit more equitable and informed way. I have one quick closing question. And again, I think this is probably most addressed to Adam. And that is that within, I think, probably any white circle, or certainly any circle of white women, the suggestion of personally volunteering in a majority minority area is met with some pushback of fear and safety concerns. No editorializing, I'm sorry, I'm the question asker here. But I just wonder if you have some words of reassurance about that, that we might share with others in our own orbit.
Well, I think that's true. I mean, we had a lot of people who were like, you're doing a show in the Ville at night, where am I going to park? What am I going to do with my car? How am I going to get there? So those concerns are deep seated. I think the first thing that I always tell people is one, it is, especially for women and women identifying people, safety concerns are real. And I think that all sorts of spaces, when you are a woman or woman presenting person, are dangerous and have all sorts of threats. And unfortunately, I can only fight for a more just world in which those fears are alleviated in all circumstances. The other thing that I will say is the scariest place is an unknown place. And if you want to feel safe volunteering somewhere, show up a bunch. And the more you go and the more you know a place and the more you know the people, the less afraid you are of that place. And the risk might still be there. But if you know the place and feel like, oh, I've been here before, I know where I'm going, oh, I might got lost, but I know how to get myself out of here, the more you're like, oh, I recognize that person and I recognize this person, all of those things start changing. It's the thing that, like, if you just show up once, it will be a new place, and new places inherently have added risk. Being a new person inherently has added risk, but consistently showing up and finding opportunities to return and make it a known place and make yourself a known entity, your safety goes up. And I feel that in my own place. You know, people come to I live in South City. I live over by like Fox Park, and I've had people come and be like, "Oh, is this a safe neighborhood?" I'm like, "Yeah, because it's my neighborhood and I know it, and I know the neighbors and I know the people and I know these things and I know where I'm at." And so that's the only kind of risk mitigation I can provide someone, is saying that the more you show up and the more you show up with people who have been showing up, the safer you will be. And so there is a sort of like real fear of going someplace new. And the only way to do that is to stop making it a new place and make it a place you've been a bunch of times. And then you're not going to have those same kinds of fears and concerns that you do the first time you show up a place. And I think I don't want to, diminish anybody's concerns, and definitely any like woman or woman presenting person's concerns about going to places by themselves or where it's unknown. But the real only safe way to do it is to make it a place that you are known and comfortable and can know people. That's really the only way to alleviate that, is to keep showing up, and to keep knowing the space. That's my only suggestion.
That is great advice. If you can see me on the screen, I'm smiling from ear to ear. I was initially envisioning a cross-stitch pillow that says the only scary place is an unknown place. So that is a great way to send us out. Thank both of you so much for your participation today. It was wonderful. And look for some of our smiling faces at your cleanup event on the 20th, and hopefully well beyond. Thanks again, and thanks everyone for joining us.
Thank you so much.
Barbara or Laura, do you have a closing word? Those look like shaking heads. Laura, you just unmuted. Was that?
I was just going to say thank you to our speakers.
All righty. And we will see all of you again soon at other Lunch and Learns and at our monthly programs as well. Thanks for your support of Women's Voices.